So you don't want to end up like this dumpster diving doofus, huh? Well then listen up, because I will be giving you the rundown on everything Jetpack related. To get started, let's talk about the three main segments of this video. Segment number 1 is the cost of the Jetpack in combination with the moons. Number 2 is the issue with practice in the Jetpack. And number 3 is the controversial part about the effectiveness of the Jetpack on each moon, represented by a tier list. Welcome to section 1. Let's talk about what you do before you even have the Jetpack. Accounting for costs. The biggest roadblock when it comes to this item is that it costs $900. This can be hard to get around because the alternative to the Jetpack is the company cruiser, which isn't always the best at times. Let's just get it out of the way. If you want to buy a Jetpack and go to Titan, you'll have to shell out a huge $1,600, aka over what it costs to go to Artifice. That is an average of approximately $533 per day if you want to do this second quota. Don't worry, however, because it gets worse. To go to Artifice, it costs $2,400 of the Jetpack, or $800 a day to make it in one quota. Some of you might be saying to yourself right now, do you really need a Jetpack though? I mean, it literally costs more than Titan. And in response to that I say, of course it's worth it. So to quickly illustrate that, here's an example with Artifice. When it comes to small items, especially things like gold bars, tea kettles, and toy robots, hauling them by foot wastes such an incredible amount of time compared to flying them, it makes me sad when I join a server that's on Artifice without a Jetpack. Here, just watch this. Flying things around makes a huge difference, which is why it's so important to get a Jetpack. Back to the main point, so what does this all mean? Are your dreams of flying around the fields of Artifice and entering Titan before the clock even appears never going to happen? Well, yes, because there are two strategies to doing this in multiplayer and solo. Strategy number 1, or the lame man's way, is to simply save up a quota. It will give you a lot of leeway and is a good way to do it if you're casually playing the game. I'm surprised you're watching this video though if you casually play. Strategy number 2 is to be a Chad and assemble a group of 4 people, or just have 2 or 3 really skilled players. You are rewarded for trying this strategy in game because your quota is so small that making $2,400 will give you a huge overtime bonus, which can be spent on stuff like shovels. When playing solo, you are definitely restricted for options. As someone who's attempted quota 10 solo, however, I can say I've definitely gotten that much. Here's the strat I used, okay? For quota 1, go to Assurance and pray it doesn't have bad weather for 3 days. Take this shortcut into the fire exit to get into the facility before it's even been like 10 seconds. Be risky but not too risky and use every technique you've got. In just this run I used a few. I heard the apparatus through the wall to find it, I ran around and jumped on turrets because they can't see in certain ways, and I dropped stuff off this ledge because it helps save a lot of time getting back up to the fire exit. I will definitely just make a whole video talking about every technique I've got, but for now, you're just gonna have to look up a different guide. Moving on to section 2, let's talk about the problem with practicing the dang thing. It's no surprise that flying the Jetpack is hard to do. You must deal with a hidden overheating mechanic, dying if you move too fast, and these dang trees on Artifice that make me want to blow my brains out. Of course, the actual worst thing about the Jetpack is that since the company cruiser is so situational, Zeeker's nerfed the Jetpack, making it go from the ridiculous cost of $700 to the abhorrent cost of $900. Obviously, you can just wait till there's a sale, but that's very luck-based and won't ever work if you're trying to get a Jetpack and go to Artifice just after the first quota. So now let's talk about what most of you are probably here for to begin with. How do you properly fly the Jetpack? Well, you'd be surprised how weirdly you can fly the Jetpack without dying. When practicing, don't go fast, go very slow. This is to prevent you from dying if you mess up. So, how do you go slow? Well, you're going to want to repeatedly toggle the thrust. To go slower, simply don't look down and toggle the thrust more frequently. This is also how you safely land. It's okay to be afraid of your WASD keys at first, but after you can fly high and land safely, just try pressing W. Over time, you will become more comfortable with leaning and can now try using your mouse. Just remember that no matter how confident you are, don't force the jetpack to remind you how jank it is. Now that I've shown you the horrors of the speed cap, let me show you overheating. Firstly, this mechanic may not even exist since it's probably just the speed cap again, but it helps a lot to pretend it exists. So what do I mean by overheating? You'll need to avoid holding the thrust for too long or you'll explode. You need an example? Okay, fair enough. In this clip, I simply hold the thrust and let it rip. After enough time, I go kablooey. Now I know this is pretty easy to avoid, but just the threat of this happening in the most dire moments of a round will remind you to space out your thrusts. Another really important thing to remember is that safely landing is really generous in this game. Unless you're literally pile driving your skull directly into the Earth's surface, you will live. Now for section 3. In this section I will be ranking every moon by how effective a jetpack is on them. I will be factoring in the amount of loot on that moon, visibility on that moon, the distance you must travel, and how hazardous the moon is overall to jetpack flyers. I will be ranking every moon in the order they appear on the terminal from top to bottom. Also yes, I will be using a tier list to show how good a moon is after I explain each moon. Getting right into it, let's talk about the first moon on the list, Experimentation. Experimentation has it all. Very clear visibility, a nice and easy straight path to the main entrance, and no threats ever basically, with just one caveat. The loot is literally the worst in the game. I'd say this would be a good place to learn how to fly, but the loot is so unbearably bad that there's basically nothing to haul. Yeah, Experimentation is gonna sit right about here. Next up is Assurance, and it's quite good. Visibility is good, the route to main is a little obscured but very manageable. The fire exit's also very easy to get to, and the loot is decent. You can really increase the amount of loot you get here by a large amount just by being able to stay in the facility longer. Also, you are of course perfectly safe from outside hazards, assuming you fly the jetpack well. All this means that Assurance is going to land itself right about here, and the only reason it's not going into Incredible is because there isn't enough loot, and a lot of the loot is large objects. Alright, now it's time for Vow. Vow has great visibility, but the route to main and fire exit is obstructed, to say the least. It can seem impossible to fly through these trees many times a day while also being fast, but there's actually a pretty easy method to getting around them. All you've got to do is fly over everything and memorize where the main entrance and fire exit is. Scanning while flying will also help a ton when finding where the main entrance is and where the ship is. One more thing is that while you are flying the jetpack, you should go to fire exit, since you're not at risk of being trapped by a giant while you're in the valley. With loot tables slightly worse than Assurance, and this problem with getting to the facility, I'm going to put Vow in the very okay tier. Offense is certainly a place you can go. Visibility is good. The route to main isn't that shabby, and you can even get to fire exit without having to do this cool trick. There is, however, two major issues with this place, and is the reason I don't go there. Most of the loot is two-handed. Not only that, but the loot tables themselves are terrible, meaning there isn't much loot to haul to begin with. Secondly, it's extremely dangerous with things like coil heads and thumpers having extremely high spawn rates on this moon. Not to mention that if you do die at the fire exit, then your teammates can't recover your jetpack. Offense isn't even a super bad moon, but it just conflicts with the jetpack so much that it is definitely one of, if not the worst moon to bring a jetpack to. For me, this firmly cements offense in the worst tier, worse than Experimentation. Next is March. March has great visibility, very simple and direct path to main, also its loot is very good. The issue is that the place is very dangerous and big. As a solo player, you will benefit more from having a jetpack as you can just fly to each of the 3 fire exits. It certainly has some pretty good loot, but suffers due to being large, dangerous, and only really making sense to Jetpack solo, since with a group everyone can just take a different entrance, but whatever, I suppose. Also, I should probably mention how I haven't been taking beehives into account because, well, you can't haul them with a jetpack. If you're really good at this game and comfortable with jetpack flying as well as memorizing where all the fire exits are, you could probably get more out of this moon than you could with Assurance. Personally, I can do runs on March with the jetpack, but it's simply too much effort for too little reward. You won't always get more loot even if it was much harder. Despite that, it definitely deserves to be in a higher spot than Assurance. Moving on to Adamant, this moon is actually a very valid choice, but it has flaws. Visibility is great once again, main entrance and fire exit are both extremely easy to get to, and the loot is fantastic. The issues are that this moon is very hazardous. Things get bad much quicker on this moon than you'd expect. This actually makes it a great partner to the jetpack, however, since if you play really well, then you can simply stay in the facility for a long time getting tons of loot. There can be old birds, but since the ship is so close and the map is hard to navigate, it is often really hard for the old bird to stop you. In my eyes, the fact that the main issue with Adamants of Baboon Hawks and Old Birds outdoors can be circumvented with the jetpack makes these two an amazing pair. Not to mention that the loot ain't bad here either. It is concerning that bottles are the highest likely item, however. I'd love to put it in the incredible tier, but just the fact that it doesn't make nearly as much money as the ones up there do, despite it making a lot, and the fact that it does have flaws, I'm gonna just have to put it at the top of the functional tier. Now it's time for the big boys, starting with red. This moon has a problematic visibility, to say the least. I didn't think it would be that bad until I tried flying here, and it was bad. Trying to balance flying fast while also being able to see hazards coming is very difficult to do. The path to the main entrance is obstructed, but once you memorize it, you will be doing a lot better. This moon is of course very hazardous, as it's one of the expert moons, but if you've watched part 1 of this Lethal Psychology series, then you should be able to handle fighting the Nutcracker, which spawns quite frequently here. All of this together would make this place quite bad if it weren't for just one thing. It's actually worth doing because the loot is not only good, but mostly small objects. If you factor everything together, then despite the fantastic loot, this moon is just so bad in every other category. If you're really good, then you can absolutely get a lot from this moon, but the incredibly high risk makes this a hard decision to make. I will be putting red at the top of the functional tier, even above Adamants, just cause the loot is so dang good, man. Now we have Dine. I may have a prejudice toward Dine, but I'll hold it back for now. The visibility has the same issue as Rend, of course. The main entrance is about as far away and is also a bit obstructed. The loot is very good, but here's my issue with Dine. The butler. By God, there are so many butlers. Unfortunately, due to this butler mayhem, I'm going to have to stick Dine all the way down into the very okay tier. Again, its loot is good, but maybe it's because I play a lot of solo, but I hate it when there's so many gosh darn butlers. Also, not to mention that there can be old birds on this moon too. Now we get to talk about what is likely the most infamous moon to pair with the jetpack, Titan. These two were a match made in heaven. Finally, you can spread your wings wide and fly, soaring through the skies of Titan. Visibility is fantastic. At the start of the day, you can fly straight off the ship into Titan without much trouble. When doing runs, flying up to the entrance of Titan is very easy. Now this place does have just one flaw, which is that it is so dangerous, but the loot, man, it's so dang good. This easily puts Titan into the very top tier. Alright, there's only one moon left to rank, and that is the Secret Moon. This moon is undoubtedly the best moon to pair with the jetpack, and maybe the best moon in the game. That moon is, of course, Artifice. This moon has a lot going for it. Visibility is clear, the route to main entrance and fire exit is easy to get to, and the loot is insane. I could go on and on about the amount of money you can make here, but Artifice has just one issue: gold bars. Gold bars are much more common here than anywhere else, being worth 102 to 210 credits each. They, however, also weigh a staggering 77 pounds, which in combination with the egregious amount of old birds and outside monsters makes hauling them back to the ship late in the day near impossible. Unless, of course, you have a jetpack, which, no matter the weight, will haul everything back in the previously discussed 11 seconds. Artifice's incredible profit, as well as being the best pair with the jetpack, puts Artifice at the tippity top of the incredible tier. Alright, well, I suppose that's everything. That's every moon what the frick is... Yeah, I'm gonna put Embryon into the no-fly zone. Hey guys, in all seriousness, thanks so much for watching my video. Become my 61st subscriber today. You know the drill. I got a video up here. I got a video up here. I'll see ya next time.